We know that the risk of cancer, the risk of cardiovascular disease, all of those are non-existent or very mild risks at the end of the day.
We have failed an entire generation of women.
The FDA had done a disservice with the Women's Health Initiative and really scaring women out of hormone therapy.
You don't want to do hormones because you're going to get breast cancer, you're going to get DVTs, and you're going to die. But what they didn't take into account is health. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So glad you're here and you're joining us with conversations in regenerative medicine, exploring frontiers in PRP, BMC, MFAT, and controversial topics, as well as cutting-edge insights for the future of interventional orthobiologics. I'm so happy everybody is here. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Dr. Ariana DeMers. I'm board certified, fellowship trained sports medicine orthopedic surgeon and regenerative medicine aficionado. I am a sought after educator and trainer in orthobiologics and ultrasound, and I have a regenerative medicine business, cash-based orthobiologics business in rural Northern California, a town of 20,000. So people always say, you don't understand, your patients have the means. So I'm going to tell you, I live in a quite rural environment and have had a lot of success with orthobiologics. And most importantly, I am passionate about helping other physicians incorporate orthobiologics in their practice seamlessly. So for those of you who are expecting Dr. Josh Schechter, fortunately or unfortunately, he had an emergency, but Dr. Matthew Hernandez has been so kind to join us, and he is the best in the business when it comes to regenerative medicine and integrative care. I thought of no one else. So I just want to introduce you to Dr. Matthew Hernandez. He is co-owner and physician at Ethos Integrative Medicine, a medical clinic that is specializing in regenerative medicine and hormone therapy, geared towards helping active individuals live the life they love. He also is a business consultant, elevating doctors in private pay medical models. He is an adjunct professor at the Southwood College of Naturopathic Medicine and a host of the Ethos Athletes podcast. So definitely a shining star and top doctor. So I am so glad that he was able to join us on very short notice. I'm so thankful to you, Matt. I'm really happy you're here. So glad you could join us. So for everybody that has joined us thus far, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to put a little bit of extra information in that thought process in regenerative medicine, and honestly talk a little bit more about maybe some controversial topics that we don't necessarily get in the mainstream research, mainstream conversations. So the other piece of this is that this is basically a fireside chat between friends, and we'll get some questions and answer sessions, and we'll be able to gain some actionable insights and implement things in your practice immediately. So you can get your burning questions answered today, and I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we're talking about here. So my belief is that orthobiologic treatments will be first-line treatment for musculoskeletal care in the next 5 years. The train is leaving the station. And so if you are not actively offering these treatments to your patients, you've got to get on the train, right? This will be standard. Here's the problem is So many of us are looking to integrate orthobiologics successfully, but it's hard, right? Maybe we know that orthobiologics is the best treatment for our patients, but how do we do it successfully? And maybe you've tried some things, but maybe you say, gosh, I don't know the science, maybe I don't know the technique, cash-based business, marketing, sales. And maybe you've just thought, I'm not good at business. But it's not our fault. We did not learn this in school. And so some of you maybe are struggling with how to be successful and capitalize on this $4 billion orthobiologics market. So maybe you're just thinking, gosh, I deserve more time with my patients. I deserve more time with my family doing the things I love, right? So if you could please just put in the chat what the thing is that you're struggling most with. And so maybe we can help you in this session today. So the question is how to win, right? While we're talking about the science today, we also need to consider how we talk about this with our patients. So we all win, patients and doctors, right? And to that end, you need a system. Now, we're not going to go over this entire system today, but we are going to get a little bit further down this journey to be wildly successful in your orthobiologics practice. So you need a system. And we're going to talk a little bit about that knowledge today. So Matt, let's get down to business. And my friend, we have questions, right? There's been so much activity around hormone replacement therapy and arthritis and tendinopathy. So my first question is, to begin, can you share what kind of led you down into the intersection of hormone replacement therapy and orthobiologics? And then maybe ultimately what has pushed you to kind of speak more publicly about the role or lack thereof in women's health with, this hormones being taken off that black box, the black box has been removed from estrogen. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, thank you for having me, and pleasure to meet everyone. So the really when we started, and I'll say we a lot because I co-own the practice with my wife as well, also a physician. So when we started our practice, a lot of our background already came in having training in HRT and being able to utilize that. And then, we started learning about orthobiologics in school, and then, more specialty training after the fact. And really, like when we sat down, we were thinking about, okay, how do we want to help people, and what do we think is the best route to go and really optimize these treatments? When you're looking at how hormones play into not only healing but with pain perception, all these different things, it really makes sense to combine the two together at the end of the day. And so this has been, we just hit our 10-year mark in our practice 2 weeks ago, and we've gone and have always combined these two things just because it made sense for us to really optimize not only the patient, but to give them the best possible treatments when we're looking at orthobiologics. And then when it comes to talking about the FDA's role in women's health, for women's health specifically, this is my wife's domain. I do men's hormones, but I can at least speak to what I hear her say and the bit that I know from her. And really, the FDA had done a disservice with the Women's Health Initiative and really scaring women out of hormone therapy. And you see that even, I don't want to deviate too much, but you see it even with men and men being scared out of hormone therapy because of cardiovascular disease, prostate cancer, all that kind of stuff. Women have the same fears. And it was just more publicly on display for women's health, which was ultimately a disservice to them, knowing that the Women's Health Initiative didn't have great statistics. The population group that they used was an older population than what would normally be used in this case. The type of hormones that they were using is not what's typically used in HRT, or not at all at what was used in HRT. So a lot of different things on that part. So I'm really glad to have seen some of the reversal of that information, and from that standpoint. And the more access to information we have, the more individuals, like from a patient perspective, are being educated and I mean, patients come in, at least the ones that we work with, come in extremely educated on options that exist for them. And I really like the trend that's going. When we started 10 years ago, we were like what we did was not as popular, and it's only become more popular throughout the 10 years. And so I really love the direction it's all going.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where do you feel like both medical societies and the FDA, we have failed an entire generation of women. We have set them up for failure at so many levels, and I think the silent actor in this is musculoskeletal health or poor musculoskeletal health.
Right.
Not only from tendinopathy, but from arthritis. Everyone thinks it's an osteoporosis problem, but that's like the end result. If you start sooner, really, this is all plays a part. So when you talk about your patients coming in educated, where do you think that, because clearly the FDA is not educating, and clearly the main medical societies are not educating our patients well on HRT. So they've clearly failed, right?
Yeah.
So where do you recommend and see the best well-informed guidance coming from?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that's really difficult for patients on the consumer side is because this market has only gotten more popular. With popularity also comes bad players into the area too, right? So you get social media influencers trying to make a buck, and some of the stuff that they say is accurate, some of it's not accurate. You have the same thing from podcasts, you have the same thing from YouTube. So there's a lot of noise in the area, right?
Don't miss out. Please subscribe to our newsletter now to stay ahead of the world of orthobiologics. You can find the link below. Additionally, if you're ready to start this journey with me in my orthobiologics masterclass, come join us.
And the way we really position ourselves is we go and talk to patients about, okay, you're going to hear a lot of information, not only from all the different forms of media you can consume, but even from your doctors that may be more conservative on treatment and not opt for HRT or not recommend it. And really our job is to kind of cut through the noise and make it individualistic for you. So like what makes sense for you as a person, not like a blanket statement, right? And that's where having experience and an understanding of what, like, if we stick with women, what's wrong with the Women's Health Initiative and those types of things is going to be really important. And so I have yet to find anyone in the research that I've done or the conferences I've attended or the podcasts that I've listened to where I take their word as gospel, right? And so you kind of take pieces of information from what you believe makes sense based on your training, on your experience, all that kind of stuff, and you put that together, and ultimately you position yourself as someone who can help patients cut through the noise with that information. And so patients can go in, listen to all the podcasts, educate themselves, all that kind of stuff, but there still is there is a variable or a factor that plays in where the doctor says everything's going to be okay, or this is ultimately what I think is best for you. Like there's still power in that, right? And so it's really just educating ourselves on that piece.
Yeah. So I'm more acting as a guide and an educator, and maybe some of that is reassurance. Because what I find, and I'm sure you find the same thing, is that this whole generation, it's been fear-based. And so it's like, oh no, you don't want to do hormones because you're going to get breast cancer, you're going to get DVTs, and you're going to like die. But what they didn't take into account is health.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so we haven't done anything to enhance women's health for the last 20 plus years regarding hormone replacement therapy. So I just, I have some, friends and colleagues who I think do a nice job. I think that Peter Attia and, others have really tried. Even Deb Matthews, she's done a really great job at trying to clarify how did we get here, right?
Yeah.
How did we get here all the way here 20 something years ago and now trying to work out of this really dangerous position that we find ourselves in where we really have done worse for our patients
Yeah.
because we've recommended against HRT for women. I was sharing with you earlier that women's hormone levels drop off significantly earlier than men's hormone levels, right? And the shocking thing that I've found is that the levels of arthritis rise precipitously at the same time when women's hormones are declining. And that's quite a bit earlier than men's arthritis levels rise for the same problem, right? And so not only do we have an earlier presentation and we have a higher level of arthritis, but it's reversible, right?
Yes.
So with hormone therapy, we can actually avoid these arthritic conditions, this early onset of these arthritic conditions. How do we rectify that in our mind that we've not only condemned women to more higher levels of osteoporosis, fracture, but tendinopathy, arthritis, all of the things that go along, accelerated aging. How do we rectify that in our brain? When patients talk to you and say, what do you mean I could have been on HRT? What do you tell them? Sorry, we screwed up, we didn't know?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to have that conversation when someone's coming to you, you have this solution for them that should have been offered to them, 10 years ago or whatever it is. And there's instances where they'll sit in front of us and say, well, I was told by, doctor down the street that, in traditional system that I wasn't a candidate for that, or, I was scared out of it because of XYZ. And it's like, okay, I get it. But at the end of the day, when we look at the research behind it, we know that the risk of cancer, the risk of cardiovascular disease, all of those are non-existent or very mild risk at the end of the day. And when we're looking at your health as a whole and how do we keep you healthy as long as possible, we know that when we're looking at muscle mass and muscle strength and all those things like bone density, all those are the big factors into how your overall health as you age, and hormones play a direct role on that. So do we get scared from weighing this risk of that may not happen, or if we have lower levels of sex hormones and all those different things that we know will cause not muscle wasting necessarily, but muscle weakness and trouble building strength and all that stuff, which direction do you want to go with, and when you're picking that. And so it becomes, when you go and think of it like, from that standpoint, it becomes a lot easier for people to understand, oh, this actually makes sense for me to be on. And it's unfortunate that they didn't get, the timing of it right necessarily if they were scared out of it. But there is a point where, they can still likely be on it at the end of the day. And so you just have to go and modify it for them.
Right, absolutely. Well, I always love these conversations because I learn so much, and, I always love everybody's perspectives, but we have more questions for you. So how do you explain this modern hormone replacement therapy safety to patients who are fearful because of these headlines, these scare tactics, these misstated statistics, really, and misstated risk factors? How do you really maybe become that guide? Because I tell you what, these women have been hearing this message for 20 years. How is it that we can cut through the noise in one visit and really be like, oh, okay, sure, no problem, I'll start HRT tomorrow? What do we use, or what do we talk about that's so clear that it will actually help understand A, why it happened, and B, that it's misplaced fear?
Yeah, it's a great question. When we talk to patients in our office, it's really knowing the history of of how it came to be, right? And so when we're looking at, again, we'll stick with women's hormones, going and talking about, okay, you saw these headlines or you were told this by this doctor, whatever it is. What this doctor, we tend to go and ask questions on, if they got their information from a doctor, we tend to ask questions to kind of gauge what that doctor's knowledge is. And so one thing would be, if they were recommended hormone therapy and the hormone, when we asked what was the hormone therapy you were recommending, it was birth control. It's like, okay, that doctor's clearly like not practicing HRT, that kind of stuff, right? They're clearly working off outdated information. And so then we can go and say, when we're looking at what this doctor's going off of, and not to badmouth the doctor or anything like that, it's just not their specialty at the end of the day. But when we're looking off of this information, they're going off of Women's Health Initiative. With Women's Health Initiative, this is what's wrong with it. We know that their candidate choice was older women that wouldn't necessarily be the ideal demographic for being on HRT in the first place. We know they use these particular hormones that are not HRT hormones. They use progestins and stuff like that instead of actual progesterone. The stats that they gave on cardiac risk and cancer risk, this is why we know that even like blood clots, for instance, we know that you can give transdermal estrogen. It has no increased risk for blood clots, but it does increase, or it does help with overall quality of life and stuff like that, right? And so it regulate a lot of those symptoms. And so when you start, what in our experience, when we start and talk about the history, the different bullet points of what was wrong with it, at that point, patients have already, at least the ones that come to us, have done a lot of like reading on their own and have heard the same thing. So the fact that we're saying the same is reassuring for them. And then we go and talk about, okay, again, that risk versus benefit ratio here of, are we scared of this X% chance? I'll go with men because I know those stats a bit better. Like with men and TRT, 2% chance that they'll develop a DVT from having an elevated testosterone with hemoglobin and hematocrit being high. So if it's 2%, and if you get a DVT, yes, that's going to be a pain, and that's like the worst case scenario that can happen here. But if we manage that really well and we don't overdose you, we pick the form of hormones that's good for you. We're doing quarterly visits to check blood work, doing those things, checking all the different risk factors that you may have. The benefit, there's a 2% chance you'll get a DVT, but then the benefit is that you get more energy, you get stronger, you recover faster, like all these different things that come with that. So most individuals do not mind taking that small risk if they know that it's going to be monitored really well. And that's our thing, is that we see people every quarter. Like it's not negotiable. If they don't want to do it, they don't work with us. So, and every quarter is important because that's how we keep them safe at the end of the day and make sure that we keep those levels, balanced, and we're checking all the different risk factors, making sure nothing's going wrong.
Yeah. So I think, what you've touched on is patient education, but also reassurance that this is not a fly-by-night clinic, that they're just not buying them online. And, you said something really important, which is that you monitor them every 3 months and it's non-negotiable.
Right.
And so for me, I think that's one thing that I think as a regenerative medicine specialist, it maybe is not doing hormone replacement therapy. That's one way to vet a practitioner who does a really good job with hormone replacement therapy. The person who took the online weekend course and doesn't do any follow-up labs, doesn't see them every quarter, doesn't measure, doesn't check other concomitant disease states, probably is not the practitioner to partner with. And so what would you say if you're recommending, what are the top things that you're like, okay, these are legit great practices for hormone replacement therapy physicians, so that if I don't want to do that, but I'm looking for someone to partner with, how do you find, or how do you vet those physicians?
Yeah, great question. So I think what I've done in the past, how often are they seeing people? So quarterly visits is our standard, right? The most that I'll go is if a patient has been with us for like 3 years, then at that point, like we know that they're balanced and everything's going at this point. If they've been with us for 3 years, typically, I'll move it to instead of every 12 weeks, we'll do every 16 weeks, so 3 times a year. But that's the most I'm willing to go. I'm not willing to do 6 months because something can happen in 6 months. So the frequency is going to be really important from that standpoint. I think one of the most important things, and I think people on this call can relate to it because like yourself, you're orthopedic surgeon trained and you do Regen, right? And so for us and hormones, we're agnostic to the type of hormone that's given. So we don't just do pellets, we don't just do injections, we don't just do creams or patches or whatever. Like we literally do not care what form we use. It's whatever's right for that individual. And I think that's really important because a lot of, and I see Margaret had also mentioned in the comment, a lot of these HRT clinics that just do pellets and stuff like that. I mean, I get it from a business standpoint. It's streamlined, it's nice, it's profitable, that kind of stuff. But you're doing spreadsheet medicine, and that's what you're trained in at that point, where you go input the patient's age, input their labs, and then the pellet company, who has obviously no bias on how much you should be giving at that point, they're the ones dictating how much pellets you're giving them. And there's obviously conflict there. So those are two big ones, like the frequency, how agnostic they are from that standpoint with the different types of treatment. I would say those are the big two at the end of the day. Like that'll help you weed out people pretty quick. From my standpoint and how we set up our business, this is harder for people to see from the outside, but a lot, and not to knock people at the end of the day, but this is just our opinion. A lot of hormone clinics go and they offer low pricing to see the doctor. And the reason they do that is because they make their money selling product, right? And so they make their money selling peptides, selling hormones and all that stuff. When we started our practice, we didn't feel like that was ethical. We didn't want our doctors to be incentivized by that. And so we charge higher amount of money, or we're on the higher end of the spectrum for our time, but it's because we don't make money off of the medication that we recommend. And so we can go and do that ethically, not feel guilty about that. Would we make more money like the other way? Probably, but that I wouldn't be able to sleep at night either. So that's it is what it is.
Those are really good kind of rules of thumb for vetting whether, the doc down the street who is doing HRT maybe is the person to partner with if you're not looking to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. We still have more questions. I'm sure you're expecting that.
Absolutely.
Can you kind of talk about how hormones influence musculoskeletal pain, healing, the regenerative response, and maybe the biggest gaps that you've seen in physician training and understanding? I think as we go along, this is kind of new territory in thinking about the relationship between hormones and musculoskeletal care. I will tell you, as an orthopedic surgeon, 15 years ago, I sure as heck did not learn about that. The only thing that we used hormones for was like by the way, you have osteoporosis and one treatment might be estrogen, but it's not recommended.
Yeah.
Right? That was the whole thing. And then when you talk about risk, when we talk as orthopedic surgeons about risk of osteoporosis, even if you have a hip fracture, you have a 25% chance of dying within the year of hip fracture. So it's not nothing, right? So if we were to be able to prescribe HRT to avoid osteoporosis, we're actually decreasing your risk factor of hip fracture and subsequent death by a significant amount.
Yeah.
So where do you see these biggest gaps? And I mean, I know where I'm coming from. I'm like, what? Pain? Knee pain? And hormones? What are you talking about, right? But where do you think the biggest gaps are, or the most helpful kind of knowledge bombs that maybe you can help us with today that has been kind of a game changer in your regenerative clinic?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that the biggest gaps are in medicine, and this is for all healthcare providers, regardless of what healthcare provider you see, from a surgeon to a physical therapist to a chiro to a massage therapist. Like, it does not matter what the healthcare provider is. Like, literally, we're all trained this way. We're all trained to have a solution that is, or look for problems that we have the single solution to, right? So if it's I use this example with patients where if they have knee pain, they see a massage therapist, they have quad tightness. They see a chiropractor, their pelvis is misaligned. They see a physical therapist, their hip is weak. They see an orthopedic surgeon, they have arthritis, right? And it could all be true to some degree, but at the end of the day, it's likely a component of all of them. But when we're looking at healthcare providers, that tends to be the biggest gap in knowledge is we focus on the things that we know how to do and we ignore everything else. And so when we're looking at hormones, when I look at a patient in front of me, some of the things that I'm paying attention to, so I can think of an individual that I saw a year ago. So we've been working with him for actually probably a year and a half now. So older guy, had arthritis in both of his knees, confirmed on x-ray, all that fun stuff, had some back pain as well that was with that, was having trouble moving around, going from seated to standing, was an avid pickleball player. That slowed down quite a bit because of the pain. He's in his 60s, and pain in general, on average was probably like a 6 to 7 out of 10 at its worst, maybe a 5 on average or so. And so he's sitting in front of me. He was referred to me from a physical therapist that I work with, and he was referred for Regen, like at the end of the day. Like he was there for injections. He wanted PRP and all that stuff. And so I'm talking to him and he's saying, yeah, I have pain, in this knee, in my back, in my wrist, all this stuff. And so it's common for us as orthobiologic individuals to go and be like, let's inject it all, let's go. And you go and do that. When I was listening to him, though, I started asking a little bit more systemic questions. What does his energy look like? What does libido look like? All those different things. Well, found out that he had low testosterone, or I had a hunch that he did. So we ran it. Sure enough, he did. His testosterone was in the 250 or something like that. And I said, hey, at the end of the day, could I go and inject you? Yes, I could inject now, and you'll probably get some relief realistically. But I want to go and get your body in a position where it can heal at its absolute best, and being able to use these injections and PRP at the fullest capacity. And so we know that sex hormones play a role in pain perception, right? And so testosterone and estrogen play a role in that. And so I told him, I was like, let's get your testosterone up first, see how you do. If my expectation, and I didn't say this out loud, but my expectation was that his pain would probably go down to a 3 out of 10 from 5. And just with that alone, just because there was a lot of stuff going on that made me feel that way. And so sure enough, we increased his testosterone, got him into the 900 range, and he started feeling better. And so his pain went down. He was able to move. He wasn't as stiff. When he was working out, he wasn't as sore after the fact, all that kind of stuff. He still had pain though. He still has arthritis, all that stuff. But we got him in a better position overall to go and do our treatments. And as a result, we were able to resolve it, I feel like, a lot faster with fewer injections than if we had just chased it with injections itself. And so, we know, like I said, sex hormones play a role with pain perception. We know that growth hormone, IGF-1, testosterone are anabolic, right? And what are we doing with these regenerative medicine treatments? We're trying to rebuild collagen. We're trying to change pain signals. And so to ignore hormones with that, I don't want to go and say it's doing a disservice, but I think we're missing the mark if we're not paying attention to that. And so there's ways that we can optimize these treatments to obviously be the best, right? And so we do that not only for orthobiologics, where we're trying to get what's the best platelet count, what's the best way to get so many stem cells, like all these different things, right? So how do you improve the environment of the body that you're injecting at the end of the day?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, because I think you're so right. As musculoskeletal practitioners, you see what you know, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can totally help that. But I think if you're not trained or haven't had exposure to the fact that sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, and other peptides and hormones can really help with musculoskeletal pain, with recovery, with tissue regeneration and recovery and repair. It's so hard to understand because clearly I didn't learn this in school, and clearly it feels uncomfortable to learn things from popular media, right? You're like, what is this estrogen pain syndrome? And then you start like going down the rabbit hole and you're like, oh my goodness, apparently this is a real thing, right? And how did I have to learn about it from social media? This seems like a problem. But fair enough. I think as we get trained, we are so siloed in the way that we train.
Don't miss out. Please subscribe to our newsletter now to stay ahead of the world of orthobiologics. You can find the link below. Additionally, if you're ready to start this journey with me in my orthobiologics masterclass, come join us.
You know, another example of our siloed training that I always use is prolotherapy. You know, as an orthopedic surgeon, A, I never got trained in prolotherapy. B, I had no idea what it was. C, when I found out what it was, I was like, oh my gosh, that's voodoo medicine. And then D, when I use it all the time, and I'm like pissed that I never got trained in how to do this and then how is it that I've been doing injections for so long and I've never used this really important tool. So I feel like hormone replacement therapy is a really viable, important tool in the toolbox for musculoskeletal care and regenerative medicine. And so where do you see, this, like, where do you start? And I think this is our next question, right? For clinicians who want to update their hormone replacement therapy approach in a safe and ethical way, like, where do you start? Where do you go? Like, because it gets pretty daunting pretty quickly. And I think the first response is like, oh, good God, you mean I'm not testing that? I'm not doing that. Like, I don't know the first thing about this. But we're also all doctors that went to school, learned the things, and as I go along in this regenerative medicine and lifestyle medicine vein of my practice, it becomes very clear that we all can just doctor our patients, right? Mm-hmm. And the patient in front of us is not one thing. It's not just a knee arthritis. It's not just a hormone deficiency. It's not just a thyroid deficiency. This is a whole person with multiple contributing factors to all of the experience and the things that they bring to the table. And pain is one of them. Pain is why patients come to seek our opinion and our help. So if you are doing orthobiologics in your practice and you're like, I have been following the news, I have been following some really big players in the field that are talking, Kelly Casperson, Peter Attia, about the musculoskeletal component of HRT, where do you start? Can you take a weekend course and at least consider that it might be part of the puzzle?
Yeah, great question. So when it comes to hormones, it's like you mentioned, it can be complicated and it could be a little daunting. My caveat to that will be, I think that for a lot of the people on this call, again, making the assumption that most people are orthopedic trained. I am not orthopedic trained. I do orthobiologics and I do hormones, but I'm not a trained surgeon. So when it comes to surgical outcomes for a knee issue compared to Regen and how to weigh the pros and cons of each side, I can't speak to. That's why I always call Ariana to figure that out. I think that I'm at a bigger disadvantage from that perspective than y'all would be from a hormone piece. So I say that because as daunting as hormones can be, I think it's possible to be able to have a solid understanding. Maybe it's not something you want to do at the end of the day, but I think it's possible to have a solid understanding of how these things connect and how it ties into Regen. And so when I'm looking at education and how to do this. So some of the things that we use from a training standpoint to train our team outside of our experience is going to be, you can use podcasts like Atia Huberman, individuals like that. Ben Greenfield's probably a little bit more on the edge with some stuff, but in general, it's good to hear those different opinions from that standpoint. So those podcasts, I think, do a fairly solid job at introducing it. I wouldn't go with everything they say. Just like I said earlier, there's not one person I found that I take their word as gospel. There's a great book, or so, let me back up. Great conference would be A4M, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. So A4M is a solid conference. They have, again, some trainings on there. One of their doctors that speaks at A4M, I forget how you say his name, but Theory Herthko or something like that. He's solid. He has a book. If you're going to get one resource, I'd probably get this one. He has a book called The Hormone Handbook, and I think there's a second edition. That one does really well. And what I like about that book is it not only tells you, it breaks down every hormone, signs, symptoms, how to troubleshoot, or how to dose, how to troubleshoot the dosing, all those different things. And that one I think is a great place to start from an understanding perspective, because you can just understand one hormone at a time. That being said, one of the biggest things that I think is really important is, just like Ariana said, the person sitting in front of you isn't just a knee. It's not just a shoulder. The person sitting in front of you is not just testosterone. It's not just estrogen. Like, hormones are a symphony. They're all interconnected. One of the things that we see in our practice is both men and women will have this problem where they came in from another hormone clinic. They have low libido. The hormone clinic just kept jacking up their testosterone. Testosterone is not the only hormone that controls libido. Like, cortisol plays an impact, estrogen plays an impact. So you have to know how to balance all those, and you have to know how to balance them for that person specifically, because again, I could have 10 different guys in front of me, and not all of them are going to be an optimal testosterone of 800. Some of them, their optimal might be 600. Others might be 1200. And so you need to learn how to balance those. But I think those are pretty solid starting points. There is a book, and I actually, Amy mentioned it in the comment. I was going to bring this up, Amy, so thanks for pointing that one out. When we talked about how do you educate patients on HRT and to help them understand, overcome fears, all that stuff, there's a book called Blind Spots by Marty Marcari. Phenomenal book. Like, if you want to understand how medicine ended up the way it is, read any of his stuff. It's a phenomenal book. But I mean, he has Blind Spots. He has The Price We Pay. There's a few books that he's written, but Blind Spots specifically goes over certain headlines that have happened in medicine. So like antibiotic use, HRT, eggs being bad, or eggs causing cholesterol issues. And in each chapter, he breaks down the history of how that came to be and then why it's wrong. And so if you go and look at the HRT chapter on that book, that'll give you a lot of the information you need for being able to have a conversation with patients without diving into hours of research.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to also mention, Donna White's BHRT Academy can get you started.
Oh, yeah. She's awesome. Yeah. She's great.
That's where I got started. So,
yeah.
And I'm an orthopedic surgeon, so we can be taught. But, the other thing that I think that patients and maybe physicians don't realize is that we all have all of the hormones, right? Women and men. They're just in different ratios. And so men have estrogen too, right? Women have testosterone too. So We're not all so different. And it is quite critical in our health and well-being. And, we don't want to just avoid disease, but we want to promote health. Right? And I think those are two very different perspectives. And so thank you so much for, providing a little different perspective from a regenerative therapy expert who also has phenomenal training in hormone replacement therapy. So the question is what's the next step, right? We got the knowledge. Thank you so much for that knowledge drop. That's awesome. I really appreciate it. So our practice launch system also provides you knowledge and expertise on how to attract the right patients, how to create a cash-based business, how to have high-converting consults for patients that just say yes, and obviously putting it all together. So I think that if you want the fast track, right, you can come see me in Clearwater join me for hands-on workshops and labs, especially in the business of orthobiologics, and some hands-on training. But ultimately, I have a little quiz for you that may help you kind of clarify what help you need. And then we're going to go to Q&A with Matt. We can ask all of our burning questions. So this is a QR code. I'd love everybody to scan this QR code to see what your next step should be in your orthobiologics practice, right? What your workflow looks like, legal freedoms, your time freedom, and really where you are on your PRP clinic. So go ahead and just scan the QR code real quick. We can always go back, but we're going to go to our Q&A session right now. And so I'll leave this up. This is Dr. Matthew Hernandez. This is his expertise. Ethos Integrative Medicine, Dr. Matt Hernandez on IG, Ethos Athletes Podcast on his podcast. But what I wanted to ask is, please, if you're having questions for Matt, Dr. Matthew Hernandez, please put them in the chat. And if you have a question, the chance is that everybody else has that same question. So please help everybody out and type the question in the chat, or maybe even just a, hey, I'm really struggling with this, or are you telling me I actually have to test for hormones? I just do PRP and knees. Is this like legit? And then maybe we can chat a little bit about that. Margaret, thank you so much for putting this. Yes, we do have this Western medicine handicap, right? Where our lab values are an issue, and how we have nutrition in our food has changed significantly as we've gone along, and we're living longer. And so people used to die at age 60. So losing your hormones at, between 40 and 50 and 60 didn't really matter if you were dead, right? So now that we have significantly longer lives, it really does matter. Just like we've talked about this concept of health span, what we're trying to do is prolong health. And I think HRT is a really important piece to delay that onset of arthritis, improve the ability for the body to continue to be able to heal itself. So these books are all awesome recommendations. There's some questions on, are there any regulations with what one might need to comply if they're doing HRT?
So I was putting a book in. Any regulations?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of fear in physicians who don't do HRT. Like, how do they cross their T's and dot their I's? Can they just go ahead and start prescribing TRT, or can they just go ahead and call it good and do it as good as those online doc in a box, or maybe not doc in a box, prescribe DHEA and progesterone and an estrogen patch? How good is that, or how not good is that? Is that a place to start? I don't have the answer for those, but I would love your opinion from a risk perspective. What is what are the worries? What are the risks? And what should we be, from a regulation standpoint, what should we be considering?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the regulation state to state, I have no idea. Here in Arizona, we can prescribe a bunch of different types of hormones and stuff. I know one popular one that people ask about quite a bit is growth hormone. That's one that I do not touch personally because I feel it's so heavily regulated. I don't want anyone knocking on my door at the end of the day. I'll use peptides instead for that to increase pulsing of growth hormone, and that tends to work well for us. But outside of that, I mean, your standard consent forms and stuff like that, I would still, even though we know risk of DVT, of cancer, of cardiovascular disease, all those are low, I would still put that on the consent form at the end of the day, because it doesn't matter what we think and what research says. Like legal, medical will always take forever to go and change their opinions. And so you're still going to be held by that standard. And so I would definitely pay attention to those. And then, yeah, really looking at different risk factors. And our philosophy at our practice is we tend to be really conservative when we dose. So a lot of clinics that I know that exist over here will start on very aggressive dosing, and that aggressive dosing is usually where you end up having trouble. So in men, it's either their testosterone is going to convert to estrogen quite a bit, and then that's going to cause an impact, or their hemoglobin hematocrit over 90 days will jump up. That's going to start causing blood pressure issues and put them at risk for DVT. So really understanding, or going and paying attention to more conservative dosing, knowing the different forms, all that stuff. Those are the things that we do to protect ourselves, and that's worked for us for the last 10 years. Knock on wood. So yeah, I would definitely pay attention to those things and really understand multiple forms. And that hormone handbook that I mentioned, he goes over different forms for treatment, and so you can use that as a guideline for your stuff.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. I don't do injectable testosterone, and I'm not sure. Is there more restrictions on prescribing injectable testosterone? Is there a registry? I think there is, right?
Yeah, so a great question. So testosterone is a a controlled substance at the end of the day. So you need DEA. Most pharmacies will check how often is this person getting testosterone, and that's in all forms. So that's going to be regardless if it's cream, troche, any of that stuff. It's all heavily regulated. So in that one, it's you want to go and make sure that you're not, and pharmacies will somewhat regulate this for you, but you want to go and make sure that you're not over prescribing it at the end of the day. So like, even a patient that I have he's been with me for like 6 years. So we do a follow-up every 4 months. And I saw him at week 14 instead of week 16. And I called in a prescription to like refill it. And the pharmacy called us back to be like, hey, are you sure you want to do an early refill on this? And say, oh yeah, it was 2 weeks early. Okay, yeah, that's fair. But I wasn't in trouble or anything like that, but it is that tightly regulated, and growth hormones even more so than that. So something to pay attention to from that standpoint.
I will share with you a tale of caution, but just like talk to your pharmacies. Pharmacists are in our world of orthopedics. Pharmacists are like the bane of our existence, but in the world of hormone replacement therapy and compounding pharmacies, they can be a lifesaver. And here, yes. I'll give you an example. So I had a patient who was using a topical compounding cream, and there was a practitioner who, they just missed the decimal point, but that's a major issue when it comes to dosing. And so she was getting 100 times the normal dose of testosterone in her cream. Now, she really liked the libido piece, but she now had anxiety. Her hair was falling out on her head, and she was getting hair other places, right? And so when I looked, I was like, I don't think this is the proper dose. And, my husband is an OBGYN. I said, hey, look at this dose. And he was like, oh my. And so we shifted her to a female dose of testosterone, not a male dose of testosterone. And, so just be really like, your pharmacists can be really good at guiding you to proper dosing and, all of those things as well. I do have a question. There's, is there an age when it's too late to provide HRT to patients?
Great question. So I will speak from the men's side because that is the side that I know. I'm women. I'm pretty sure there is a point where you can't do it anymore, but I'm not 100% on that one. From men, I haven't seen a limit on that. There's more precautions, like as the older they get, if you're dealing with like BPH and stuff like that, you obviously don't want to make that worse. But again, you can do conservative dosing and still be fine. I mean, I have the oldest guy I have on testosterone, he's on a cream, so he's on an injection where it's like crazy high, but he is on a cream. He's 86. So, it's no issue. He's been on it for 4 or 5 years now. So yeah, so still no issue.
Yeah, so I always joke that, if men's hormone testosterone dropped at the same precipitous rate as women go through menopause, there would be like a national emergency, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So just putting that into perspective, I will also tell you, my patients who are reliably on hormone therapy, my women who are on hormone replacement therapy and have been for years, when you compare them to their peers, they are significantly younger looking. Their tissues are significantly more robust. And so this is a game changer for your patients. If I know we've gone over time, but if our audience here is like, gosh, I wonder what it would take to just set up a bare bones HRT clinic. What does that look like? Is this a massive investment? Is it, can you start pretty just simply just testing some patients and saying, hey, why don't we start with the bare basics and see where we go? Like, how does that look?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, investment is not the biggest investment is going to be in the education for it. That's literally it, because you don't have to hold inventory from a business perspective, right? Like you literally just use compounding pharmacies or, whatever. I would say compounding pharmacies, they're more knowledgeable when it comes to this stuff. You have to be able to do blood work, but again, you can send people to LabCorp. You don't even need that in-house if it's not needed. And so, yeah, it really is going and starting. If I had a pro tip, and, I hesitate to say this because, I don't know how people will take it, but whatever. Men are easier with hormones than women. Like with women, you're chasing a moving target. And I say that because when we do our doctors meetings here at our office to see like patient progress, our two docs who do women's hormones, when I was like, our patients hitting the wins that we're looking for, stuff like that, the target's always moving. Whereas guys, it's like energy. Yeah, done. Awesome. Like perfect. Let's move on to the next thing. And so if you want an easy place to start that is a little bit more forgiving, I would start with guys, because it is easier at the end of the day. And even when, Alex, my wife, when she hears me do men's hormone consults, and she's had to cover for me a few times, and she's like, oh my God, that is so much easier than doing women's consults. And so that's my 2 cents on that. You can potentially start with guys on that part, just because you're really looking at testosterone, estrogen, a CBC, a CMP, PSA. Those are the very base labs that you need, and then you can build from there. And then I know women, you have to obviously factor in like cycle timing and all that kind of stuff, or the timing of cycle and everything like that. But going and learning the basic testing and learning the different forms of that you can give. So like with men, when I work with men and I want to increase their testosterone, I know the options that I have available are going to be, you could do clomiphene, you could do Kysotrex, you could do testosterone injection, testosterone cream, or pellet, which is pretty rare for guys to want to do anyway. Those are the 4 ways we can increase testosterone. And those, I laid them out from most conservative to most aggressive. And so you can learn how to do those and be able to do that part. And I think there was a question about like hair loss and HRT in men. I have had some guys who were on injectable testosterone. They were starting to have hair thinning, hair loss. I switched them over to Kysotrex, which is has a short half-life, and it's a pill. Their hair loss went away. Like it stopped. And so you can change forms, and that can also make a difference for people.
Awesome. Let's see here. How concerned must we be about HRT interacting with patients' medications? Like,
great question.
Should we stress out? Like, doesn't human have hormones, right?
There's definitely not a lot of interactions. I mean, so maybe some small ones, but like you're gonna hurt someone screwing up their blood pressure medication than you will their hormones. So yeah, there's not big interactions to worry about too much.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. Well, everybody, thanks so much for staying over time. I really appreciate it. Matt, thanks so much for dropping your knowledge bombs, and hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about how we really start on the front end of orthobiologic care, priming and improving the human before we draw blood so that we can improve the outcomes on the back end. So this is going to be pre-injection optimization of orthobiologics in 2 weeks. So hope to see you then. Have a great rest of your night.